Hello, everybody. How are you? I'm so good. We are heading to the number seven lecture of Christian church and music history. So I'm going to talk about the 17th century church music. But before the starting that, I'm gonna talk about 16th century Catholic music because it was so important because at the time, still Catholic music was central in Europe. So many Lutheran churches, composers, the musicians were learned by Catholic music at the time. So slowly their music was developed a lot from the Catholic music. But you are gonna see the 18th century, uh, like Johann Sebastian Bach, Lutheran church's music was so much centered at the time. So we should understand 16th century the Catholic music. So I'm going to talk briefly and then uh, keep it talk about the 17th century. So I'm gonna share the screen now. This is today's timetable. So I'm going to talk Catholic sacred music in 16th century, and then Europe in the 17th century, and then talk about Baroque and Italian sacred music and the Lutheran church music. So firstly, I'm going to talk Catholic music, sacred music in 16th century. So how music was used in the Catholic Church was changed relatively little by the religious disorder of the 16th century. Although the Church undertook some reforms, including major changes in liturgy and chant, the primary response to the Reformation was to stiffen the Church's resolve and reaffirm its doctrines, traditions, and practices. Church leaders did not translate services into the vernacular or invite the worshippers to participate in the liturgy through singing. Instead, we find continuity in the role played by music and in the genre and the forms that were used, from chant to polyphonic masses and motets. Tradition, splendor, and the projection through music of the power and leadership of the church were valued over congregational participation. So Flemish composers remained prominent in the genre uh, generation active between 1520 and 1550, working in positions over Europe. Among the best known were Adrian Willert, Nicolas Gombart, and Jacobus Clemens. All were born in Flanders, but took post elsewhere, extending a century-old tradition. Willert was at the Saint Mark in Venice. Clemens serves the churches in the Netherlands, and Gombert spent most of his career in the chapel of uh, Emperor Charles V, working in Madrid, Vienna, and Brussels. Catholic composers in this period shared several characteristics. They preserved the careful dissonance treatment, and they expanded the typical number of voices from four to five or six, which allowed a greater variety of the contrasting combinations. They defined the mode of the polyphonic works clearly through frequent cadences and the melodic profiles in the superiors and the tenor voices that fit the range of the mode, whether aesthetic or plagar. Most works were in a duple meter, sometimes with brief, contrasting passages in triple meter. The prevailing texture continued to be imitative polyphony, but now voices often varied motifs as they imitate them. Phrases tend to overlap, with more voices beginning a new idea while others cadences, producing almost a continuous flow articulated only by strong cadences at the end of the sections. Imitation mass became the most common type of mass, followed by the paraphrase mass, although cantus firmus masses continue to be written. Chant melodies, usually treated fairly through paraphrase in all voices, served as a subject for motets as well as masses. Canons and other intricate structural devices appeared much less often than they had in previous generations. So we can see several of these traits in Gombert's uh, Gombert's composed songs based on a chant with the same words. Each phrase of the text is treated in a separate point of the imitation, using a melody idea, a paraphrase from the chant. As each point of imitation cadences on the modal final, the next has already begun. The succession of interlocking points of imitation continues throughout the work, creating stable flow that lacks the clear breaks and the strong contrast that were typical of Josquin, with whom Gombert was said to have studied. At each new phrase, the voices enter in all different order and after a different interval of time, providing endless variety with a unified structure. The music reflects the value Gombert placed on combining continuity with constant variation, and the lesser value he placed on the bombastic effect just being achieved through contrast of the character, texture, and the figuration, and through word painting. Although they shared many characteristics, composers at this time also developed individual styles. Willard, with his long career in Italy, was mostly affected by the humanist movement. He carefully suited his music to the accentuation, rhetoric, and the punctuation of the text. He never allowed the rest to interrupt a word or thought within a vocal line, and he placed a strong cadence in all voices only at the significant breaks in the text. Willard was one of the first composers to insist that syllables be printed precisely under their notes and that careful attention be paid to the stresses of Latin pronunciations. So Nicholas Gombert is so important at the time. So I want to show you one example of his music. Okay. So this is Nicholas Gombert Media Vita by the Gesualdo VI. This music is so beautiful, right? The by Nicolas Gombert. So at the time, you can see this music is so colorful and fully harmonized with, important. Every voices were so important, which have the responsibility. So that at that time was, the the most important time for the Catholic music. So now you can see that Giovanni Pierluigi da Palestrina was the most important composer in the Catholic music's history. So the controversy around the uh, intellig- intelligibility of the words in the polyphonic music became linked to Giovanni Pierluigi da Palestrina, the leading Italian composer of church music in the 16th century. According to a legend already circulating soon after his death, Palestina saved the polyphony from the condemnation by the Council of the Trent by composing a six-voice that was worshipful in spirit and did not obscure the words. The work in the question was the Pope Marcellus Mass, published in Palestrina's second book of Masses in the 1567. While the legend is probably false, Palestina notes in his dedication to this collection that the masses it contained were written in a new manner, no doubt responding to the desire of some for greater clarity in setting the text. Palestrina has been called the Prince of Music, and his works the absolute perfection of the church style. His sober, elegant music captured the essence of the Catholic response to the Reformation in a polyphony of utter purity. Yet his music is also remarkably varied in its melodies, rhymes, textures, and sonorities, and sensitivity to the text, making it profoundly satisfying to hear. The Palestinian style is exemplified in his 104 masses. 51 are imitation masses based on the polyphonic model. The 34 are paraphrase masses, almost all chant, with a borrowed melody paraphrased in voices. 8 masses use the old-fashioned cantus firmus method, including the first of two he wrote on Romularme. Also, reminiscent of the older Flemish tradition are a small number of canonic masses. Six masses, including the Pope Marcellus Mass, are free, using neither canons nor borrowed materials. So for understanding Palestina, I'm going to show one video of his music. So the name is Magnificat Primi Tony by Voices 8.
Magnificat
Okay, now I'm going to jump into the Europe in the 17th century. The interest in innovation among musicians paralleled new ideas in science, politics, and economics. The effects of varying polyphonical uh, political structures and relative wealth made the circumstance for musicians different in each part of the Western Europe, influencing the music cultivated in the different regions. Europe, as you can see in the picture, was in the midst of the scientific revolution, led by a new breed of investigators who relied on mathematics, observation, and practical experiment to extend knowledge beyond received opinion. Johannes Kepler showed in 1609 that the planets, including the Earth, move around the Sun in egg-shaped orbits at speeds that vary with their distance from the Sun. During the following decade, Galileo Galilei demonstrated the laws that control motion and used the newly invented telescope to discover sunspots and moons orbiting Jupiter. Sir, Sir Francis Bacon argued for an uh, empirical approach to science, relying on direct observation rather than on ancient authorities. Balancing Bacon's inductive method, Rene Descartes put forth a deductive approach that explained the world through mathematics, logic, and reasoning from the first principles. These two standards join in the work of the Sir Isaac Newton, whose law of gravitation developed in the 1660s combined acute observation with mathematical elegance, and whose invention of the calculus created new methods in mathematics and engineering. These scientists did not entirely abandon the traditions they inherit an elaborate account of the harmony, harking back to Plato, and Newton was an alchemist as well as physicist, but their focus on experimentation and observation and their integration of physics with mathematics set a pattern for scientific, scientific method for centuries to come. The same interest in what is useful and effective, often in combination with what is hallowed by tradition, is apparent in the 17th century music of all kinds. Perception and the perceived effect lay at the heart of the new styles in art and music around 1600, including the second practice and recitative, and in the new genre developed throughout the century, from opera cantata and oratorio to solo sonata, trio sonata, suite, overture, and concerto. The century also saw new thinking about politics, ranging from the England levelers who advocate the democracy with equal political rights for all men, to Thomas Hobbes argued for an all-powerful state. Such debates were stimulated in part by struggles for power or disputes over religion that sometimes broke out into war. Some long-standing conflicts were resolved around the turn of the 17th century. In France, Henry I issued the Edict of Nantes in the 1598, guaranteeing some freedom to Protestants while confirming as the state religion. Protestant England and the Catholic Spain ended decades war in the 1604, and the Calvinist Netherlands gained independence from Spain in uh, 1609 and became a republic. But religious conflict combined with struggle for political advantage within the Holy Roman Empire precipitate the 13 Years' War, which devastated Germany, reducing the population in some areas by more than half. The English Civil War, primarily a battle for power between the king and the parliament, results in a temporary end to the monarchy, followed by its restoration in the 1660s. Most wars were purely political as Spain, France, England, and other major powers jockeyed for superiority, often involving other regions such as Italy and the Low Countries in their conflicts. Almost everywhere, the authority of the state grew. All these political and religious conflicts directly affect music, chiefly because rulers and the church authorities remain important patrons. Meanwhile, Europeans were expanding overseas. During the 17th century, the British, French, and the Dutch established colonies in North America, the Caribbean, Africa, and Asia in competition with Spain and Portugal. Especially lucrative imports were sugar and tobacco, new luxury items for Europe, grown on a plantation in the Americas. These crops required the intensive labor provided by the cruel trade in human life that brought the Africans to the New World as slaves. Europeans who settled in the western area brought their traditions with them, including Catholic service music to the Spanish colonies and metric ceremony to British North America. Britain, the Netherlands, and northern Italy prospered from the capitalism, a system in which individuals invest their own money in business designed to return a profit. An important innovation was the joint stock company, which pooled the wealth of many individuals while limiting their risk. The stock companies were formed to finance opera house in Hamburg, London, and other cities. Capitalism put money in the hands of the individuals who would invest or spend it locally and so boost the economy. The capitalist system provides a better economic engine than a concentration of money in the hands of the state or the privileged few, as was as was the practice in Spain, France, and many smaller principalities. Among the effects on music were the rise of public opera and public concerts, as well as an increased demand from the upper and the middle classes for public music, musical instruments, and music lessons. Musicians continue to depend on a patronage from the court, church, or city, and the type of music that one support varied from region to region. Musicians were best off in Italy, which was wealthy from the trade, yet still divided between Spanish control in the south, the papal states around Rome, and several independent states in the north. Rulers, cities, and leading families support music and the art as a way of competing for prestige. Aristocrats in Florence sponsored a brilliant series of musical and theatrical innovations around the 1600s, spawning similar efforts by the Dukes of Mantua, churchmen in Rome, and the citizens of Venice. Their support continued Italian reign as the dominant influence in European music through the middle 18th century. In France, power and wealth became more concentrated in the King the Louis the 14th controlled the arts, including music, and used them to assert his glory. During the 17th century, France replaced Spain as the predominant power on the continent. Partly as a result, French music was imitated widely, while the music of Spain had little influence beyond its borders. Civil war and parliamentary right limit the wealth of the English royalty, but their patronage strongly influenced the national taste. The calamity of the 30 Years' War set uh, treasuries throughout the Holy Roman Empire. But after mid-century, German courts and the free city-states built up their musical establishment, drawing on influence from both Italy and France. The church continued to support music, although its role was less important than it had been in the previous centuries. After the reform of benefice by the Council of Trent deprived churches and court chapels of a major source of funding and of talent. Along with aristocratic, civic, and ecclesiastical protesting, many cities had academies, private associations that, among other functions, sponsored musical activities. Uh, Public opera houses were established in many cities, beginning in Venice in the 1637. Public concerts to which one subscribed or paid admission first occurred in England in 1672. But the practice did not become widespread in Europe until the later 1700s. So now I'm going to continue to talk about the Baroque culture. It is not only the art, but also music at the time in the 17th century. So how the term Baroque meaning exaggerate or in bad taste came to be applied to the art and the music of the several generations is a story of changing tastes and values. The word is French from the Portuguese Barroco, mishapen per. It was the first applied art in the middle 18th centuries by critics who preferred the newer, simpler style. The older Baroque music was deemed by one critic to be dissonant and unmelodious, with capricious and extravagant changes of key and matter, and by another as aiming to surprise by the boldness of its sounds. Travel writer Charles de Brosses applied the term to architecture, complaining that the palm place in Rome was decorated with filigree better to tableware than to buildings. So when 19th century art critics began to appreciate the ornate, dramatic, and expressive tendencies of the 17th century painting and architecture, Baroque took on a positive meaning. Music historians since the 1920s saw many of the same qualities of extravagance, decoration, and the focus on drama and expression in much music of the times. And by the 1950s, Baroque was well established as a name for the period of about 1600 to around 1750. Recognizing that this 150 years encompassed a diversity of styles too great to be embraced by one word, we will speak of a Baroque period, but not the Baroque style. The boundary dates must be taken as rough approximations for the time when composers and the listeners shared ideas for music and accept common conventions for how it should behave. Most important, they prize music for its dramatic power and its capacity to move the affections. The most striking aspect of the 17th century literature, art, and music is its focus on the dramatic. Not since ancient Greece were there so many playwrights among the leading authors, including William Shakespeare. Poetry of the time often had uh, theatrical qualities and vivid images and dramatic scenes in the poems of John Donne and epic Paradise Lost of John Milton and the novel Don Quixote by the Spanish Miguel de Cervantes, Cervantes at times suggest the intensity of stage performance. In art and architecture as in music, the Baroque began in Italy. The theatricality of the Baroque art is seen in the sculptures of Gian Lorenzo Bernini, who worked for the church and other patrons in 17th century in Rome. Contrasting Michelangelo's famous David with Bernini's David, you can see the picture on the screen shows the change from Renaissance to Baroque forms. Michelangelo evokes ancient Greek um, with his standing nude, celebrates the nobility and the beauty of the human figure through balance and the proportions, and portrays his hero as contemplative and still, with only a furrowed brow to suggest the coming battle with Goliath. Bernini shows David winding up to sling to the stone, his body dynamic, his muscles taut, his lips and face tense with exertion. Instead of the contemplation and the balance, Bernini emphasized the motion and change. The effect is dramatic, making the viewer respond emotionally rather than with detached ad- admiration. Even more stunning is Bernini's architect taste of the Saint Teresa. Teresa of Avila, a 16th century Spanish nun, mystic, and the leader in the Catholic Reformation, had a vision of the angel's arrow piercing her heart, overwhelming her with both pain and joy. Bernini captures that moment of transformation with the saint in rapture, her robes moving widely about her, borne upward on a cloud toward a light from heaven. So Baroque architecture could be equally theatrical, using ancient and Renaissance elements in new and uh, astounding astounding ways. Bernini's dramatic design for the square in the front of the St. Peter's Basilica at the Vatican features the two semicircular colonnades, the four-column deep, that seem to enfold the observer, symbolizing the church's claim to embrace the world while the columns, capitals, portals, the other components are traditional and based on ancient classical models. The length and the curve are unusual, and the height, width, and the open space add to the spectacular effect. Just as the central impulse of the Baroque art is dramatic, centered in opera but extending to the songs, church music, and instrumental music. All kinds of motion and the change in music from rhythmic motions and the melody rise and fall to contrast of the harmony, texture, and the style were used with a new intensity to convey emotions and suggest dramatic action. Drama requires an audience, and it is the 17th century that the concept of a public in the modern sense began to emerge. Until then, even when music's the sole purpose was to entertain, performers and the listeners were near to each other, and the performer could quickly turn into a listener, as in the music making at court and in private homes that fostered the vogue for the madrigal and other secular songs. But during the 17th century, performers became professionals, and the listener was no longer a co-participant, but became a passive recipient whose feelings the performers sought to move. This century saw the first public opera houses, the first public concerts, and other new venue for music in which the audience was more distant physically than had been typical in the earlier era. So moving to Italian sacred music. So just as the Gian Lorenzo Bernini used theory, uh, theatrical effect for his religious sculptures and architecture, so Italian church composers adopted the idiom for church music, setting religious text in sacred concertos that incorporated bass continuo and the concertato medium monody and the operatic style from recitative to aria. The stimulus was the same in both cases, using a dramatic, powerful art medium to convey the church's message in the most persuasive way. Yet, the church did not abandon polyphony. Indeed, Palestrina's style became the supreme model for church music, bringing association of age, tradition, and purity. Composers were routinely trained to write in the old contrapuntal style, known from mid-century on as the stile antico, meaning is old style, which coexists alongside the stile moderno, meaning is the modern style. A composer might utilize both styles, sometimes in a single piece, as Monteverdi did on several occasions. Over time, the stile antico was modernized. Composers add a basso continuo and regularized rhymes, and the church modes gave way to major minor tonality. So Johann Joseph Fox codified this quasi-Palestrian counterpoint in his famous treatise Gradus ad Parnassum, which remained the most influential textbook on the counterpoint for the next 2 centuries. So for Stile Moderno, Claudio Monteverdi was the most important composer because he started to argue to use the Stile Moderno than the Stile Antico, meaning is, he wanna use more human emotions rather than just church styles. So he used many different harmonic mode rather than the stile antico, meaning it's in the 16th century. So I want to show you the video what is the stile antico and the stile moderno. So you can see the difference between that kind of music. So firstly, I'm gonna show you Stile Antico, a song by Stile Antico, the same name. So the song name is Salve Regina by Josquin. Yes, this is the Stile Antico, and you know, we've listened to so much music, kind of this music like that, because we are taught about so many times about the Stile Antico style, even though you didn't know about it, but still you listened, you have listened a lot with this style. But from now, because of the Claudio Monteverdi, argued that the church music, not only for the church music, the music needs a new style, and meaning is the stile moderno. So in stile moderno, the Claudio Monteverdi used the emotional style, not like a Palestinian style. So you can see it, you can compare this music with Josquin's music. And the music was composed with one solo singer instrument with a beautiful melody. So this style is totally different. So as you see, this style is more like a solo singing style with their drama. So it was developed with the opera and oratorio, meaning is they needed the scene and they need the drama. So, you know, so many composers were composed that songs that or works with stile moderno. So now I'm going to talk about oratorio. So I think you might know about the oratorio, or even even though you don't know about the oratorio, you know George Handel's Messiah. The Messiah is so uh, famous in the world, uh, especially the chorus number named Alleluia. So maybe you already know about the oratorio. So now I'm going to talk about the oratorio. So Italy had a long tradition of religious music outside the church services, such as the Lauda. In 17th century Rome, a new genre of non-liturgical religious music emerged, combining narrative, dialogue, and commentary, such as sacred dramatic works, at the first relatively brief but soon growing to 20 minutes or more in length, were performed at the meetings of lay societies who gathered to pray, hear sermons, and sing laudes and other devotional songs. By mid-century, a piece of this type came to be known as an oratorio, after the Italian word for the building where such devotions were held. From Rome, the practice of writing and performing oratorios spread across Italy and into Vienna, Germany, and France in the later 17th century, then into Spain and England in the 18th century. Like operas, oratorios use recitativos, meaning is speaking with music, and arias, and the duets, and the instrumental preludes, and the ritornalos. But oratorios differed from the opera in several ways. Their subject matter was religious. They were not staged. Action was described or suggested rather than played out. There was often a narrator, and the chorus usually an ensemble of several voices singing one to the part could take various roles, from the participating in the drama to narrating or meditating on events. Early oratorio librettos were in Italian or in Latin, and despite general similarities, the two types served somewhat different purposes. Since they were in the vernacular, Italian oratorios were a useful tool for the Catholic Church to spread its message of faith to commoners and noblemen alike. Italian oratorios were longer than Latin ones, sometimes lasting as long as an hour, usually in two parts with a sermon in the middle. They resembled operas in style and could provide a high-minded uh, alternative to the theatrical form that was at times condemned as sinful by the church. Often the same singers were hired to sing opera and oratorio, helping to blur the stylistic differences between the genres. However, especially early on, the Italian oratorio repertoire was not as carefully preserved, since it was considered a function of music to spread the faith. The Latin oratorio, on the other hand, was more cherished by the church elite because, like early operas for aristocratic courts, it was it was presented by invitation only, with the most sophisticated resource available, sparing no expense. Latin oratorios were usually in one extended part. Both Latin and vernacular oratorios came to be performed most often in Lent. So the leading composer of Latin oratorios was Giacomo Carissimi. His Historia di Iapte exemplifies the mid-century oratorios. In the sacred concertos of Gabrieli, Grandi, Vissana, and Cozzonani, the oratorios of the Carissimi, and the other Catholic sacred music, we see composers using a wide range of styles with both secular and religious origins to convey the church's message to their listeners. Rhetorical effectiveness was prized far above stylistic purity. In these works, a primacy of the text and its dramatic uh, declamation was central. So, for your understanding, I'm going to show one video of oratorio by Carissimi named Yapta. So this is quietly long, but you can understand what is oratorio. It is similar like opera. Uh, so in the oratorio, you can see the scene. You can see, one guy sing solo songs and respond by the choir, something like that. It's like a drama. So I'm gonna show you this video for your understanding.
Ocasset brevium filios Israel, rex filiorum Anna, et verbis jefte acquiescere nodo isset. Factus est super jefte spiritus Domini, et progressus ad filios Anna, votum vodit Domino dicens. Sit validerit Dominus filius Ammon in manus meas, quicumque primo de domo mia occurrerit mi, offeram illum Dominum in holocaustum.
He is a narrator who talks.
Contra dei limpidi, perite gentes, perite gentes. Et salite in cimbalis, et salite in cimbalis, innum cantemus Domino,
her aria.
et modulemur
Organ.
canticum, et modulemur canticum. Laudemus regem cenitum, laudemus belle principem, qui filiorum Israel, victorem ducem redidit, qui filiorum Israel, victorem ducem redidit, victorem ducem redidit. Innum cantemus Domino, et modo.
So lastly, I'm going to talk about Lutheran church music in the 17th century. So in German-speaking regions, composers in both the Catholic and the Lutheran churches soon took up the new monodic and concertato techniques. Sacred music in Austria and the Catholic southern Germany remained under strong Italian influence, with Italian composers particularly active in Munich, Salzburg, Prague, and Vienna. Composers in the Lutheran Center and the northern regions employed new media, sometimes using choral tunes or texts. Alongside compositions in the modern style, Lutheran composers continued to write polyphonic choral motets and motets on biblical texts. Many biblical motets by Hans Leo Hassler, um, Michael, Michael Praetorius, and others in the early 17th century were in the large-scale concerto medium, showing Germans' admiration for the uh, Venetian fashion. The small sacred concerto was even more common. Here the most influential the figures were Viadana, whose works circulated in the German-speaking lands, and Johann Hermann Schein, who published two important collections in the 1618 and 1626 at Leipzig, both titled Opera Nova, meaning it's a new little works. The first book consists chiefly of the duets with continuo on chorals, freely paraphrasing the choral melodies, inserting vocal embellishments, and dividing praise among the voices. In these works, Schein blends the Lutheran choral tradition with the modern Italian style. The second book includes more choral duets, but the most pieces are on a biblical text, and the settings are more varied, often using one or more solo instruments and contrasting solo with ensemble sections. Schein's sacred concertos set a precedent for a long series of similar works by Lutheran composers. So I'm going to show you Schein's piece. Oh, I'm so sorry, I missed the Schein's works. So I'm going to search right now. Just wanna give you one example of the Shine's music. So maybe this is helpful to understand about the Shine. So now you can see this is the Lutheran church style, especially by Shine. But you can see the similarity with the Italian style because they were learned by Italian. So I'm I need to keep going to talk about the Lutheran church music because we still have a lot, but we have a limited time. So now I'm going to talk about the most important composer at the time in Lutheran church music, named Heinrich Schütz, was a master at applying the new Italian styles to church music. He studied in Venice with Giovanni Gabriele, visit again visit again during Monteverdi's years there, and brought both composers' approaches back to Germany, where he was the chapel master at the Saxon court in Dresden. He is particularly renowned for writing music that captures the meanings and the imagery of the text. Although he was a Lutheran composer at the Lutheran court, he seldom used choral melodies in his sacred music, preferring to create motets and sacred concertos on text from the Bible and other sources. Schütz published most of his sacred works in a series of the collections that shows a remarkable variety. The first, Psalms of David, combines a sensitive treatment of the German text with the magnificent of the Venetian large-scale concerto for two or more choruses, soloists, and instruments, following the mother of the Gabrielli, Canciones Sacre, contains the polyphonic Latin motets, the joyed by the harmonic novelties and the madrigal-like word painting. The first book of the Sinfonie Sacrée present a concert Latin motets for the various small combination of voices and the instruments, published in the Venice during Schitt's second visit there. It shows the strong influence of Monteverdi and Grandi, combining recitative, aria, and concertate, the madrigal styles. So Schitt wrote the piece in his Kleine Geistliche Konzerte, meaning it's a small sacred concert during the 1630s for the church services at Dresden. As he mentioned in his preface, the chapel had been greatly reduced in size due to the 30 Years' War. So then rising through the Germany and draining his patron's treasury, so he scored the concertos for only 1 to 5 solo voices, fewer singers than in most of his previous works, and used no instruments beyond the continuo. These two collections were quite popular throughout Germany because they met the need for small works suitable for performance in Lutheran churches. So I'm going to show you the Heimliche sheet music. So firstly, Psalms of David by Dresdner Kammer Chor. So you can see the sheet style.
Wenn man Schütz Musik liebt und kennt, so wie ich, und dann noch diese perfekte Interpretation vom Dresdner Kammer und Herrn Rademann, den Musikern, hört, dann ist das ein Hochgenuss.
Wenn wir diese Idee von Popularität solcher Texte übertragen können, wenn wir damit die Leute anstecken können, das ist natürlich ja unser Anliegen, diese Musik so lebendig wie möglich zu machen.
So during his lifetime, Schitt's music was known mainly in the Lutheran areas of Germany, and after his death, it faded from the repertoire until revived in the 19th and the 20th centuries. Yet he helped to establish Germany as a central part of the European tradition rather than as a peripheral region. His synthesis of the German and the Italian elements helped to lay the foundation for later German composers, from Bach through Brahms. So I'm going to finish today's lecture right now, and I'm going to teach you about the 18th century music, the late, I mean, from the late 70s to the 18th music, and you're gonna see the most important composers for the church music history, and some guys and you already know many composers at that time, like Bach, Handel, and even Vivaldi. So I'm going to show so many examples of their music because the music is so beautiful. Instead of just explaining everything to you, because it's a lot. But this lecture is designed for the basic idea. So I decide to show you more examples rather than explanation. So have a great week and see you next week.